And our first presenters are Paul Vasile and Mieke Vandersall of New York City. Mika is the founder of Not-So-Churchy, which is an LGBT-friendly community in New York. Paul assists with the music for Not-So-Churchy and is also the director of Music That Makes Community. And they're going to be talking about some radical ways they unleashed scripture and interpretation in their community. So Paul and Mika.
Okay, so let's be honest, friends. Worship is often a spectator sport. Well organized, well orchestrated, well executed, so the seams rarely show. While this approach can be meaningful and produce strong results, the leadership team of Not-So-Churchy, a queer, Presbyterian, new worshiping community in New York City, committed to life-giving, liberating practices of faith offered in not-so-churchy ways, wondered if we were sending another message. Were we communicating that worship planning and leadership is the province of experts, and those in the pews are helpers, not leaders? So we embarked on a year-long project supported by the Calvin Institute of Worship. Congregants themselves learned how to interpret and present scripture readings and exercise creative and theological authority usually reserved for others. We began at a retreat where congregants selected a passage of scripture to present at an appointed service sometime over the next 12 months.
We were led through workshops on basic songwriting, song leading, and movement. After the retreat, congregants brought their early drafts of presentations to workshops, where they could practice presenting their pieces and listen to observations of their fellow congregants and creative professionals. On their appointed date, each member rehearsed with the musicians and presented their reading during the service. This project, which has become an integrated part of our liturgical year, has been a rich learning experience for the congregation. It even was compiled into an online resource that you can find on our website. What did we learn and discover in the process? Discovery number 1, that discomfort is the doorway to something else. We describe Not-So-Churchy as an encouraging space, a place where we support each other as we take risks, accept new challenges, stumble, learn, grow together, even though the culture of our community is a process-oriented place. Most of us were daunted by the work of creating scripture presentations. I don't know how to write music.
I'm not creative.
I hate my singing voice.
I speak publicly all the time, but I'm terrified of standing up in front of people at church.
I've had musical training, but everyone knows this, and I'm afraid that what I offer will be disappointing.
In some cases, the anxieties arrived unexpectedly, sometimes triggered by the passage itself and the way it intersected with our lives. But as each of us created scripture presentations, our various discomforts became doorways for discoveries about ourselves, each other, and scripture. We were often surprised to learn that someone who exudes confidence was actually terrified. We learned to respect and grapple with each other's anxieties, not to dismiss them with sunny assurances. And we were moved as we saw those around us fight through their difficulties and produce something meaningful to them and therefore to us.
Kristen said, what helped me learn was feeling like I was in a space that would not judge me or my work.
Discovery number 2, noticing is a powerful practice. So at our regular workshops, we wanted to give full creative license to those who were presenting scripture. So we took special care to avoid evaluation or prescription. Instead, after a piece had been presented in a workshop, a facilitator asked the group, "What did you notice?" And the group reported what happened to their bodies and attention as they listened, watched, and sang.
So noticing might sound like, hey, Paul, the two harmony parts cross each other, and sometimes I lost track of what part I was supposed to sing.
Whereas this is not noticing.
Paul, I noticed that you could choose better harmonies.
And neither is this.
Paul, I love your voice so much, and I love the song you wrote, and I just want everybody in the whole wide world to hear it.
By continuing to ask and faithfully answer the question, what did you notice? We learn to produce valuable pieces of insight that are based purely in our experience, not our opinions. We've learned to respect and nurture each other as creators. So after absorbing what the workshop audience noticed, creators made adjustments to their pieces. And as a community, we noticed how much clearer and more authoritative the final presentations were as a result of the supportive, experience-based reflection process.
Discovery number 3, our story is God's story. Most in our community have been to churches where scripture is read by a minister or lay leader. As passive listeners, we have to work harder to connect the readings to their life stories. By contrast, when we began creating our own scripture presentations, we found we could not escape those connections. To the contrary, we began to see and hear our own lives within the scriptures, and the passages came to life as never before.
Jake said, "I'd been struggling with my reluctance to engage in activist work, and reading this passage helped me realize my reluctance emerged from my sense of being unqualified. So I made a refrain out of the words, 'Who am I?' And then the story was now not only about Moses, but about me."
The ownership of the stories we found extends to the entire congregation. When Matt presented Ezekiel's story about the valley of the dry bones, he invited the congregants to sing, "I prophesied as I had been commanded." Afterwards, several congregants noted with astonishment the experience of singing about having prophesied and seeing others around them do the same. As we sang that refrain, it occurred to me that I was surrounded by prophets, one of them observed.
And finally, discovery number 4. We are all artists. Not-So-Churchy services occur once a month, so before the service, we set up the worship space, and we're often trying different configuration of chairs and table. Congregants enter a space both familiar and new to them, a reminder that though we have some idea of what awaits us in the liturgy, much is unknown, even to the leaders. The musicians, celebrant, song leader, and congregation create it together. This is the core of how we do church. As a congregant likes to say, we tabernacle. Since undertaking the work of creating scripture presentations, the congregants' capacities as artistic collaborators and improvisers have grown significantly, and our voices have been strengthened. The presentations lovingly pushed us to discover our abilities as artistic collaborators and improvisers.
All of this has deepened our trust for each other and our appreciation for what trust makes possible. By sharing in the work of creating the liturgy, we've discovered a more powerful sense of who we are as a community, and that stronger sense of community has given each of us a platform to discover and celebrate our individual gifts. Thank you.
Thank you.